This is Talk is Sheep, the official podcast of the Wild Sheep Society of BC, brought to you by Sitka Gear. Come along as we bring conversations that matter to you into the high alpine. This episode is sponsored by our conservation partner, Stone Glacier. Thank you, Sitka Gear and Stone Glacier, for investing in healthy wildlife and sustainable ecosystems. Well, good day, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have an incredibly special guest on our podcast. Many of you know the name and the reputation that's been a stalwart in the guide and outfitting community. So it's an honor and privilege to welcome Harold Grinde of Gana River Outfitters onto the podcast. Harold, welcome. It's such a pleasure to connect with you today.
All right. Well, thanks for inviting me on, Kyle.
Harold, you've done so much, and you've been, when I think about the Northwest Territories, the first person I think of is Harold Grinde, and I think that there's a lot of people too. I know there's been people a lot longer in the game than I have that probably have some of those older names that they resonate for sure, but you've certainly been the guiding light in the Northwest Territories for multiple decades now. Harold, just for those that maybe haven't had an opportunity to visit with you or don't know you as well, maybe if you could share a little bit about your current role, what you're doing in the territories, and talk a little bit about Gana River Outfitters and your involvement with that whole process.
Yeah, so currently I am not involved at a high level with the outfitting industry in the territories. I still have many connections from my years of being there, but I have stepped down as president of the Association of Mackenzie Mountains Outfitters. I currently still serve on the board of NWT Tourism. I think I've been on the board for about 15 years now, and served a couple terms as chair of the board. I was chair of the board through COVID-19. I always felt that as someone who, made his living in the territories with the resources there, I had to give back what I could. So I served in multiple roles. I was the representative for the Northwest Territories on the Hunting and Angling Advisory Committee in Ottawa that Stephen Harper set up when he was in power. Made many trips to Ottawa to meetings as a representative of the territories on that. When I was president, I was the rep for the AMO on the Federation, the Canadian National Outfitters Federation, and made many trips to Ottawa and other places for meetings at the national level for the industry. Currently, I backed off and passed it on to Tavis Molnar, who's the current chair of our president of the Association of the Mackenzie Mountain Outfitters. But I would still attend all the meetings and stuff. So
that's awesome, Harold. Let's talk a little bit about Gana River Outfitters and sort of. I know that there's a succession plan going on there as well, and you're thinking of the next generation. So talk about currently, where we're at with Gana River Outfitters, and maybe about your history that led you to the Northwest Territories, I guess.
Yeah. So I guess I'll start. When I was graduated high school, I had some friends that did some trail riding in the mountains, and I loved going out to the mountains and loved horses all my life and working with horses. So I got a Alberta guide's license. You didn't have to have an area or anything. But you had to write a test and become a guide in Alberta in those days, and you could take some people out. That led to I went farming out of high school for a while, but I had a brother who had wrangled in the Yukon, and so I decided that sounded like a lot more fun than farming. So I went to the Yukon in 1980 as a guide, and guided for, at that time it was called the Sutherland Bay. Recently it's been called Lone Wolf. I'm not even sure what it's called today. I think Moose Meadows or something. But an area in the southern Yukon, guided mixed bag hunts mostly, but fan and sheep, moose and caribou, grizzly bears. I worked there for 5 years for the outfitter's name was Bob Hazard. And when he sold the area, I didn't feel like I wanted to work for the new owners. And so I got a job working for an outfit in BC in the Pelly Lake area. It was called Ingenique Outfitters. And that's where I met Bill Mackenzie, who was my predecessor at Gana River. Bill was in his last year at his Yukon Outfitters area, and I was going to learn it so I could manage it for the new owners. And so I worked with Bill that one summer and hunted stone sheep with him at out of Pelly Lake Camp there. And I wound up working there 3 years and then decided I should do something different, and didn't hit it off perfectly with the current owner. And so I had trained another young guy to hunt the area, and I got into the construction industry. So that would have taken me about to the late 1980s. And in 1996, I had a friend that wanted to go on a Dall sheep hunt. So I phoned Bill and went to the Northwest Territories to Gana River in 1996 on a sheep hunt. Killed a beautiful old 38-inch broom dram, 12 years old. And you can't help but fall in love with the territories if you go there, especially if you're a sheep hunter. And I got along really well with Bill, and he asked me at the end of that term if I might be interested in coming in and helping him run the area and figuring out a succession plan. So we talked about that a little. I went back in 1997 to build a log cabin in trade for a caribou hunt, and one of the guides got hurt. I wound up guiding 2 hunts, and so in the fall of 97, I bought in as a partner with Bill and worked there as a guide until the end of the 2004 season. Was Bill's last year. So I took over management of Gana in 2005, and this will be 22 years with the reins. So yeah, it's been quite a run.
So much I want to unpack there, Harold. Maybe I just was curious, you were interested, you obviously like the, mountain stuff, as a young lad, and that kind of led your passion for it. Did you do any sheep hunting before you started guiding? Were you doing some Alberta sheep hunts just as a local guy when you're a young guy?
I didn't hunt sheep until I guided sheep in the Yukon. That first year I guided some sheep hunts, but I hadn't hunted sheep before. I'd hunted elk and moose and deer, mule deer and whitetail and stuff like that. Since I was old enough pretty much to get a license, I had hunted, but not for sheep. I didn't have that sheep bug until I actually went to the Yukon and guided a couple of sheep hunts, and then you get hooked pretty quick.
So would you say that's kind of your passion now? Like, obviously Gana is obviously known for incredible Dall sheep hunting, but caribou stuff and others too. But for you, is your passion sheep, or is it something else? Do you like something different?
I enjoy sheep hunting. I don't. I've killed. I've killed the 3 North American or Canadian species. That I've got a stone and I've got a Dall, and I've got a couple of bighorns in my career. I've got a really good old bighorn as well. So I don't go sheep hunting anymore. I don't feel like it's a limited resource, and I don't need to be harvesting another one, but I do enjoy taking young guys out and trying to show them the ropes and getting guys started in the sheep hunting and any hunting at all. I teach a lot of hunter ed courses and stuff. Many years ago, I got my instructor's license here in Alberta, so I enjoy getting people involved in the industry or interested in hunting through teaching. And yeah.
Awesome. So, Harold, I've heard so much about the territories, and I've never had the privilege to go out there and experience it. And I've obviously got to experience a ton of BC, and I feel like this is incredible, the wilderness and everything. But everyone talks about, well, if you want the real experience, check out the Yukon. But if you want the real experience, go to the territories. There's just nothing of it. I've heard so many really respected hunters that I have a lot of time for, the Cam and Adam Fosses of the world, and so many others that talk about that Mackenzie experience and the territories experience. Maybe help describe that in your eyes. And I guess probably nobody knows it better than you do, or you're certainly one of the best to describe what it's like to experience the Mackenzies and the territories. I understand it's unlike anything else.
Yeah, the terrain is different to start with than, I've guided the Yukon, I've guided in BC, hunted the mountains in Alberta. The terrain is different. To start with, we don't have, at least in the northern end where I'm at, there is no pine, there is no balsam. It's spruce, and it's quite scattered. I think the historical climate there has been cold, not deep snow winters. It's east slope, so the Mackenzie Mountains are the east slope of the Rockies, so it's relatively dry. We don't normally get a lot of bad weather. And so the vegetation is quite sparse. You can pretty much walk or ride a horse up through the timbered hillsides anywhere without getting in trouble. Pretty much easy going. You don't get into the shin tangle balsam or the thick patches of alder in our area. You can hunt and find a place where it's pretty thick, but it's not hard to get around. It's nice walking generally and fairly open. You also get multiple colors of, it's mostly sedimentary rock, but you get lots of colors from purples to greens to, whites to black shale. The mountains themselves are quite spectacular. I think the most amazing thing about the Mackenzies is how untouched it is, how remote it is. There's very few roads. The old canal road cuts across through the middle of it. It's pretty much impassable today for anything other than, maybe somebody with a dirt bike, but then how do you get across the rivers? So it's really, really remote. Our hunters come to Norman Wells, and it's 100 miles out to our camp, and the end of the road where we can get our horses to at the Yukon border is 105 miles from our camp as well, air miles. So it's remote. You don't see many other people. Some of the guys a little further south in the Mackenzies might see some residents come in with Argos and stuff along the old canal road. But where we're at, we might see a resident hunter in our area every couple of years. It's pretty rare that we see anybody else. There's a little bit of mineral exploration happens at times, but thankfully, so far, nobody's found anything in our section that's probably ever going to be developed. They say there's some deposits there that if World War III happened, they might need the mineral, but it's so remote and so far to get any of that stuff out. If you have to haul ore out, it would just be cost prohibitive for the most part.
Harold, one thing we haven't touched on is the game. Maybe if you don't mind, just touch a little bit about the game you've experienced and just the, I guess, abundance and I guess the diversity too, the biodiversity of the Mackenzies.
Yeah, it's not high density. Like people think that there's massive herds of game there, but it's not. It's the north. Winters are long and tough, and so it isn't that there's high densities of game. Probably, you can run onto big herds of caribou, but the sheep and the moose and the caribou at most of the time are scattered over large areas, and you can go for miles and miles and not see anything. But there are pockets of game. They like the easy habitat as well, but it's not like there's an abundance of game because there's very few people there, and if you know where to look for the game, you can find it. But it's not near the densities we would have in BC, like in Region 7 in BC, where, there's thousands and thousands of elk where there used to be. I think density-wise, there's probably a higher density there of everything. The moose are doing really well right now. I think game everywhere has always been, runs in cycles as far as abundance goes. The year that I took over in 2005, we lost pretty much all the sheep on the very north edge of our area. We went to some of that area where we used to take 2 or 3 rams a year. We never took a ram for 10 or 12 years before we started to see them come back into there. The sheep population is doing well now, but it isn't at the level it was when I guided there back around 2000 to 2005. The sheep were so abundant, it was crazy. And yet, it doesn't seem like, we've always harvested light to try and give high success rates and good quality and really good age averages. The Mackenzie Mountains over the last 10 years, the average annual age of the harvest is over 10 years, has been consistently for over 10 years, so, and probably longer than that. It really is amazing that because the outfitters can manage it themselves, and we all harvest at a low enough level that we keep our age averages really strong.
And I guess that goes to the reputation that the Northwest Territories and Gana River certainly has in the industry, that if you want a good quality hunt with a high level of success with a quality animal, that's where you want to go. That's the reputation that you guys have.
And it isn't because we're special people. It's because it's so remote that there's very few, there's very few other harvesters out there besides us. It's just so expensive and so far to go to get out into those mountains. Very few. Most of the indigenous peoples in the territory hunted moose and caribou. The Dene people especially, they love caribou better than anything, and some moose, but they really weren't into hunting sheep in a big way. Opportunistic, obviously, if they had the chance, they would, but why would you spend all the time climbing a mountain to hunt a sheep when you can shoot a moose right beside the river, right? It's that's sort of how I view it anyway.
Mm-hmm. Harold, you've been at the helm since 2005. So over the 21 years that you've been climbing the mountains in the territories, what would you say is the most significant change? Or has it been pretty steady? Obviously, some fluctuation in game, probably due to climate events, tough winters, that sort of stuff. But are there any major changes, any predation changes, anything on the landscape, anything that you've noticed since your early days there?
No, I don't see things changing. I know people like to talk about climate change and how it's changing everything, but I can go down the lake and show you a stand of timber where the timber, old trees, some of them are still alive, some of them are dead and rotted away, and some are laying there or standing there dead that are, hundreds of years old, and there's nothing growing today that gets that big, right? Like I believe climate has always been cyclical, and we see that in the vegetation. I can cut a big tree down to mill for lumber and look at the growth rings, and you can see places where there'll be 50 rings in about a half an inch, and then you'll see a place where they've grown, up to an eighth of an inch a year. Because it's so far north, and pretty much everything, unless it's on a gravel bar or on a creek bed, is standing over top of permafrost, the growth on everything is really slow. I've cut 6-inch dead standing trees that I had a forester actually from BC was hunting with me, and I gave it to him. I says, cut a block off and said, age this for me, and he got looking with his binoculars, turned them upside down like so you can magnify the rings. He figured that 6-inch dead standing spruce was probably over 300 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. So things don't change fast. I do see like where the old horse camps were when they first started there in the 60s, and they've been abandoned, where the horses tramped the moss out and destroyed some of that permafrost, or the moss cover that protects the permafrost. There's a whole bunch of really lush, rank vegetation, partly from the nutrients in the horse manure, but partly because you disturb that moss cover and then the permafrost can thaw out. So there's a little warmer layer there for stuff to stand in and grow in. And you can see a little difference in that. We do see some sinkholes where the permafrost happens to thaw out on a slope on a mountain, and it'll cave in, and there'll be a little trickle of water come out because the ice is melted underneath. But that's been happening since the dawn of time as well, right? There is always some change, but I don't see anything to say that climate change is destroying the habitat or anything like that.
That's awesome and refreshing to hear. As scientists, they jump on that in a heartbeat, but people on the landscape, they have a different story, and it's sure encouraging to hear that there's some common sense that goes into this stuff too, right? So,
yeah, that's the way I look at it. Anybody who thinks that any variance from what we would consider average is alarming. Average is average. We have extremes both ways all the time, right? And I believe that's been happening forever, and it'll continue to happen. We have extremes. I've seen 3 feet of snow on top of the mountains in the middle of July. And, before I got there in 1992, Bill talked about on the first week of September, the lakes all froze and everybody had to get the courier in and land somewhere on a gravel bar to get moved out because the lakes froze the first week of September. I haven't seen that in my career, but if you're there long enough, it'll happen again.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you mentioned Bill Mackenzie there, and Gana River has such an incredible storied history, And obviously there's a legacy with Gana particularly. There's other outfitters too, but obviously Gana is one of the names that people are immediately going to mention when talking about the Northwest Territories. Maybe just touch a little bit on that history. And, we know names like Zane Palmer and Bill and Dusty Cooper and Gary Koopman and Bill and Carol. Maybe just touch a little bit on that. And do you feel that weight of that legacy? Your name is associated so closely with the Northwest Territories and Mackenzie Mountain Outfitters, and then of course yourself through Gana River. Just touch a little bit on that legacy, and is that something that you think about, Harold? Do you think about the next generation and beyond?
Well, I have partners. When I bought in with Bill, once I took over management, my brother Adam and one of his daughters Mary and one of his sons Coulter bought in some shares as well, and then Mary's got married to Ryan Famel, who is sort of our right-hand man at camp, and he and Mary will take over management next year when I've retired. I'll be 70 this summer, so I told him I'll run it till I'm 70, and then I want to step out of the road. I think we all tend to think that we aren't as old as we really are and want to hang on as long as we can. I saw Bill stick around a few years longer than he maybe should have, where he couldn't really get everything done that he should have, and he wasn't able to get around well, and I didn't want to be that guy. I want to pass it off to the next generation, while I can still say, hold my head up and say I've done a good job this far. So, and I've always believed that you're never at the end. Like I tell my partners that we can never stop and say it's good enough. We don't have to fix something. We don't have to improve something. There's no such thing as standing still in the world. If you're not working to improve and get better, you're going backwards. You can't just stay where you're at, right? As soon as you think, well, everything's fixed up, everything's nice, we're just going to just keep running it exactly like this, it starts to degrade and go downhill. You have to work to improve all the time. And yeah, we can't expand and hunt more game, but we can make cabins and make things more comfortable. We can do a better job of what we do, right? And we've been so fortunate at Gana that the year that I took over, or the year that I bought in was Bill, he asked me about doing a hydro system that he'd dreamed of. And we put in a hydroelectric system at Palmer Lake that in 1997, that's been operational ever since. It's never let us down. We produce free electricity, and that's allowed us to improve camp and do all kinds of things that people are starting to do it now with running generators and doing solar systems. But our electrical system has enabled us to really make camp as comfortable as it is, and we heat all of our hot water with electricity. We have lights in all the cabins. Some of our cabins even have electric heat. So that has allowed us to make a very comfortable camp. It isn't fancy. It's not a big fancy lodge like you would build somewhere in BC along the highway, but it's everything's insulated and as neat and tidy and clean as we can make it, and that's what we strive for. A lot of the buildings have been added on to. The cook shack, I think, is actually the original building with 4 different additions on it. So it's kind of patchwork, but it's comfortable and functional, and it's home for us. Yeah.
That's awesome. Harold, obviously you had a history of, with your farming and then your guiding and the construction side of things. And then when you transitioned into the role of a co-owner initially with Bill, talk a little bit about some of the things you learned from Bill in those early days about, game management, guiding, conservation, I guess even any business stuff. Can you touch a little bit on that transition, on what that was in those early days as you transitioned into that role? Yeah,
and it was, I guess I just really watched and learned. I was guiding full time those years that Bill was still there. But I did see lots of things that we could improve on, and, with cleaning up camp, and a good example is the airstrip. We had a little cub strip that was about 500 feet long. We improved it a little and got about 600 while Bill was there. But I said, we should work on this, and, the line's okay. It'll take some work, but we can make a Twin Otter strip, right? And we can then move in from Mac Pass with on wheels rather than have to fly out of Sheldon Lake, which is an extra 60 miles. So move in and move out would be cheaper and more efficient. And Bill said, "Oh, we'd never be able to do that. We'd never be able to do that." Well, most of the hunts are over with fairly early, and guys sit around with not much to do. And I said, "No, we could do it." So the year I took over from Bill, when the guys had time, we would work, and I would work when I had time, working on the strip. Grubbing stumps out, and I built a blade that we could pull with a quad and move a little material. We had to go through and hand pick the rocks, but over about, I guess, probably 4 different rebuilds on the airstrip, we now have 1,500 foot of grass strip, and it's a beautiful strip. The Northright say it's the best strip in the mountains by far, and people will come there and they say, "Oh, how do you get the grass to grow on it? How can you get this grass this lush and green on the strip?" And I said, "Well, all the horse manure that lands in base camp when the horses are in the corrals gets hauled over and scattered on the strip, right? And we put extra seed on it every year." So, yeah, we have a really good strip. But that's one of the things that I guided full time, but if I got tagged out early and I had 4 or 5 days, I'd trail back to base camp and work on something that I saw that needed to be fixed and cleaned up. And that was why, it's one of the reasons I said you don't want to stay too long. Bill was happy just to his area ran very efficiently, and Bill was a very good organizer. And it was different in those days. Bill ordered all the groceries for the summer before the season started. He would have a grocery order that came in every 100 change, all done through the mail. We had the only communication we had those first years was the old SSB radio, and sketchy at best whether you could ever get a hold of anybody. So you didn't have a backup plan. If you didn't have it planned in advance, what you would need and what was coming in, you were scrambling, and you might just do without, right? Whereas today, with instant communication, with internet and all the camps and phones, if you need something, you send an email or make a phone call and order it from town. And if it's a part for something, you can order online and have it shipped to Norman Wells, and the next thing you know, you've got it. But in the good old days, it wasn't like that. You sent out your grub order with the hunters for the grub that was going to come in 2 weeks, right? Yeah. I remember when I guided in the Yukon, writing my grocery order, didn't have even a paper. I wrote it on the back, part of an old paper flour sack. I wrote the grub order, sent it to town with the hunters that were leaving, and they give it to the outfitter in town. And at the next hunter change, those groceries that you had ordered 2 weeks ago came in with the next group of hunters. So you had to plan, right? So I think those old days when we didn't have instant communication made us become planners and good at thinking far enough ahead that you didn't run out of stuff, right? Because you had to.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that note, Harold, like you think of the transition that you've seen in the last 21 years, and there's been so many changes in the hunting space, communications, technology, but also, hunting prices have changed. There's just all these different moving factors. You look over your 20-year span as head of Gana River. What are the major things that have stand out? What's better? What's worse? What are your thoughts on the changes that have happened?
I don't know. I think most of us, as we get older, kind of wish for the good old days. Like the one thing that bothers me about the instant communication is, because most of us now have Starlink at our camps, instead of sitting around and telling stories and visiting with clients, it's amazing how much time everybody, including myself, spends looking at their phone or on the computer doing something or looking at the news or whatever. Where, in the old hunting camps where there was none of that didn't happen. You became a better conversationalist. You shared stories, a lot more one-on-one personal interaction with clients and crew before the day of the internet, right? I talked a little bit about the instant communication. So, yeah, it's a different world. Good in some ways, but not in all ways, right? It's nice to have that instant communication. It wonderful for emergencies, right? But on the other hand, the idea that people don't just sit down and spend the night visiting. And we try to have campfire nights where we go out and have everybody come sit around the fire. But it's amazing how many people sneak off just to check their emails and do stuff. And it's nice to be able to leave the world behind. I miss the days when there was no internet in camp. And you waited for letters, right? All the communication when I started and took over from Bill, all communication with hunters was done by letter mail. Yeah.
Yeah, different era. Hey, very cool.
A different era, right? And yeah, some good and some bad, with the changes we see today. But it's definitely not all positive, in my mind, anyway.
For sure. So, Harold, when you look forward, like to the next generation, so and that's the cool thing I think about Gana is it's a family-run business yourself, and then Adam came in as your partner, and now Mary and Ryan sort of taking over at the helm. Obviously, that family aspect is critical. Was it always your vision that it was going to be a family-run operation, or it just sort of happened to work out that way?
No, I think that was always the vision. I wasn't married when I bought in from Bill, and so that's why I went into an agreement with Ryan and Mary and Mary and Adam, my brother, and Coulter, that they could buy some. And then, when I decided I'd had enough, they'd have a chance to take over. I have kids now that might not see that chance, but they can make their own way in life, and that's fine. And hopefully they'll be able to work there and have a slice in the area anyway. So we're still figuring out those last details of all that transition stuff, but it's going well. And no, I think I've always felt that it should be, it's nice if it's a family-run business. Different operations that have gone big and gone the outfitting industry and treated it as a big commercial business where it was corporate and they own multiple areas. I don't think they've ever had the success that the family-run businesses have. People want to talk to the outfitter when they're in camp. People want to, that one-on-one personal relationship. It's a little bit of a unique business in that it really hasn't thrived anywhere where people have tried to have multiple areas and turn it into a big corporate thing, right? I've told lots of people, my industry is different. Like corporate, the way the big corporations think is you have to grow, you have to get bigger, you have to get bigger, you have to get bigger to be successful. Well, wildlife is obviously a finite resource, so we can't just keep hunting more and more and more every year. That's not how you improve in our industry. You improve by quality of service, quality of experience, and I've always tried to market it as not just come to shoot a sheep or a caribou or a moose, but come and enjoy this beautiful remote place. There's no place like it on earth. Come and enjoy your time here. Don't pack up and go home early if you shoot something. Stick around, and if you don't want to do anything else, fish and pick some berries, go for a walk. I mean, there's very few places like it on earth. Why wouldn't you stay and enjoy it? And I understand people who have businesses and obligations at home. If they have to go home early, that's their choice. But I sure don't encourage people to go home early. I encourage them to stay if they possibly can.
Yeah, for sure. Well said. So I'm curious, Harold, like you've been so active for decades, and now sort of you're looking at sort of, the transition. How do you see yourself not being able to fly into the Mackenzies and spending a season in there and sort of sitting back home in Alberta and missing out on that experience? Is that something that scares the heck out of you, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I wouldn't say it scares me. It's I will definitely miss the Mackenzies if I'm not there. I think they are already planning on having me come up in 27 and build another cabin in one of our camps. We've applied for another lease, so we should be able to build another cabin. And I enjoy doing log work and stuff like that. So we'll hopefully be able to make a few trips up there. If nothing else, just to go up for a week and pick a bunch of berries, right? On years when there's nice berries crop. So. I'll be busy. I've got some mares and I raise some colts for the outfit, and we'll keep doing that. And I'll have some time to work on colts and get them calmed down and started for the guys. And yeah, I'm not one who's ever been able to sit around and do nothing, so I'll be busy with something as long as I'm able, right? As long as my health stands in. And I've been blessed to have the career I've enjoyed. I don't think anybody could ask for more in life than, to have his family around him, to do what he loves to do, and be able to make a living doing it, right? And I've been very blessed to say that that's how my life has turned out. I tell everybody, I said, here's a picture of looking out the window at Palmer Lake. I have the best office in the whole world. And yeah, I'll miss it for sure if I'm not there.
Well, Harold, I hear you talk, and there's so much respect from our community, from the wild sheep world, the conservation world, about what you do. And just hearing that, it's just a testament to the quality of character you are. And I look over the time, what you've done, I see what you've done through the Wild Sheep Foundation and the support you've offered them. And, we always talk about time, treasure, and talent. And Harold, you show up in spades with all those all the time. So your benevolence in donations, it was interesting. Mike Smith at Wild Sheep Foundation Alberta. Of course, we were there last weekend, and I totally missed you. I didn't even realize you're in the room. And Mike's like, "Yeah, well, Harold was on the stage." I'm like, I was visiting, and I totally missed that. I'm like, darn it, I really wanted to visit with Harold, but anyway, Mike had said, well, we went to some other outfitters for some donations because Harold's always given, and we just didn't, we're just worried about asking too much. And then you went up and were bugging Mike at the show. Hey, let's put this up on auction. We want to get this. So it's a testament to your character and your quality of person, Harold. And then we see, who's the auction spotter at Sheep Show. Were you on one of the inaugural board members with WSF? It was FNAWS Alberta at the time, Alberta FNAWS. I know you were on their board. How did that work?
Yeah, so a friend of mine and I talked about we should start an Alberta chapter, and then a little bit later he phoned. He said, "Well, I saw something somewhere that they've actually some guys in Sundre putting one together." So they had an organizational meeting, and we went down to the meeting, and I think I guess we were just board members that first year. I don't even remember. I'd have to dig back through some of my old stuff. But we were there. They already, I think, had applied and got a nonprofit stuff. Darcy Alm was the founding president in Alberta, and I think he did 2 years. But I helped organize the first banquet. Was held at Olds, at the college in Olds, Darcy, whether he was 1 or 2 years as president of Alberta Wild Sheep, then I came on, and my buddy Trevor Evans, he was treasurer for several years, and I think I did 2 terms, so maybe 4 years as president of Alberta Wild Sheep, and then Pete Mountain, I believe, is the one who took it on after I did. So it was a rush. We moved it the first year I became president. We moved it to the lodge from where we were holding it in Olds. We just had outgrown that facility, and the lodge, we could get 400 people in, and we pretty much packed it for several years, and then eventually it moved to Black Knight or moved around because it just kept growing. I think they were over 900 this year, right? So,
yeah.
But it was, it was fun, lots of fun, and good to see that Alberta chapter growing and doing well. And while I was president, I believe the Edson chapter came on as well. So they kind of had a banquet in Edson back in the oil boom days. That chapter did really, really well as well. So, yeah. It's been fun to be part of it. I was asked to serve on the national board, but I didn't want to be spread too thin. If you're going to do something, it's good to be able to do it well. So I've sort of dodged that bullet all my life, but served a lot, in the territories as president of AMO, on the board of NWT Tourism, the app. And then I do lots at home in the off season too. I was very involved at the Christian school where our kids go to school. I was chair of the board there for about 6 or 8 years. I'm treasurer again now. So I try to get a little bit of a break here and there. But no, I really enjoy working with kids as well. And I think that's something that's important. if we want a future in the hunting industry and just hunting in general, we better sow some seeds in our young generation, or we might just lose those opportunities that we're blessed to have today, right? So I've taught to all the junior high kids that have ever gone through the school since I've been involved there. I teach hunter ed to them, and done a couple courses at other places as well for kids in schools. So I enjoy doing that, and I have lots of kids come here and do field trips where we'll go for a walk in the bush and look at tracks and talk about different things. So yeah, and it's nice to have some wildlife mounts and stuff in the house, and the kids get a kick out of looking at skulls and hides and all that stuff. So from right at the little preschoolers all on up to the junior high kids, they all enjoy coming out and doing field trips here at home.
That's fantastic. Harold, touch a little bit on why you have such a keen support for the conservation groups and organizations out there. So obviously you talked about the youth and that legacy and that next generation. So clearly that's part of it. But, the donations and all the things that you do to support organizations like the Wild Sheep Foundation, the Alberta chapter, the Society, just so many, SCI, like the list is long and distinguished of the support you've given. Why is that so critical to have the support? Because not everyone has that same conservation ethic. We see people out there that just they don't participate in that. So I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, I guess I just feel the industry has been good to me, and you have to give back. I've always loved the Wild Sheep Foundation. I think it's probably one of the best conservation organizations out there as far as putting money back towards the resource. Putting sheep on the mountain is our goal, and we do really well at that. We're, I think, much more efficient than some of the bigger organizations that are pretty top heavy with leadership. Wild Sheep is always, I've just felt it's an organization that has done a lot of good. And you look at the opportunities to hunt wild sheep in the United States, and a lot of that was from sheep donated from Alberta, captured here in Alberta and moved south. But there's way more opportunities today than there was in the past. And a lot of that is due to the work done by Wild Sheep Foundation at the national board and at chapter levels. I'm a little bit disappointed that we don't get more done in Canada to support our wild sheep and other game resources. But doesn't mean we should stop trying, right?
Mm-hmm. Well said. Well said. I'd like to pick your brain a little bit, Harold, on I guess, what you've seen over the years on the ground. And I guess so you've been in there for 21 years and you've seen all these changes and sort of you're looking at that next generation coming through with Mary and Ryan taking over. What keeps you passionate about the territories, Gana River maybe, or what keeps you passionate about, I guess, life really now that you're sort of looking at that next generation taking over?
I don't know. I just I think we all should try to leave things better than we found them. So Gana River was a great area when I got there, and Bill had been running it, but I found ways to improve the camp, and I think we can still help to see that happens, and I think that's the way we should look at wildlife resources and opportunities for the next generation to hunt is, we've been fortunate and blessed to be able to hunt our whole lives, and I want my kids to be able to hunt. So we just keep doing what we can to see that come to pass. That's how I look at it. I'm not so worried about me. I just think that I should give back because I have received so much.
That's amazing. And do you think that you've sort of instilled that in that next generation? Do you feel like they have that same ethic moving forward in Mary and Ryan? Is that something you feel like you've done a good job of sharing that vision with them?
Yeah, I really hope so. I think so. They very much, like, we're basically the last ones in the Northwest Territories now that still run horses, those traditional types of hunts, and we all agree that that's something that that's something we need to preserve and stick with, because, yeah, it might be more profitable to get a helicopter and do it that way. But to me, that's not a traditional hunt, and there's something to be said for preserving the tradition and giving the people the opportunity to go on a horseback hunt for a white sheep that want one, right? Not everybody does. Other people want to go on a 2-day hunt and shoot around and go home and go back to the office, but lots of people want that experience. So it's very fulfilling to be able to offer that, I think. And I really enjoy, I love the horses. I love raising the colts. I love breaking them and getting them up there and seeing them go to work. And yeah, it's just part of what we are and what we believe in. So yeah, I don't see it changing.
That's fantastic. So now when you look back over your time, you know, and you look to the future, and I'm not trying to drag out the negativity. I'm going to ask you the positive side of it here soon. But, you know, are there any red flags or concerns that you have for the outfitting industry or conservation moving forward? Is there anything that's makes you a little bit nervous as you move into the future?
No, not. I mean, no different than anywhere else. There is a big push from the anti-hunting movement to shut down all of this stuff, and caribou numbers have been in decline across the north. Well, for a long time. I mean, we used to have caribou go down into northern Washington and Oregon, and that's just not the case today. Probably not much we can do because of development, and that may be part of that. Who knows? There is some concern for the opportunities to hunt caribou in the north, but our caribou numbers, from what I've seen in my career, are very solid, and I think a lot of the panic on caribou is created in that caribou, because you see them somewhere one year, if you think they should be there the next year and they're not, then you think they're gone. But caribou don't ever do the same thing twice in a row. They're always, they're all over the map. And that's been, I think, historical. And caribou spread out, and they try to not overgraze any part of their habitat or overutilize any part of their habitat. So they're always moving. I remember at Gana, when I first guided there with Bill, there was a big, just a timberline bench with rolly hills and some little puddles and the odd spruce tree. And there were caribou trails that were a foot wide and 2 feet deep, pounded across the hillsides there. And I never saw caribou there, not one, never saw caribou there. And there was old shed antlers there. And I thought, whatever happened to all these caribou? And one year I got in the plane because we weren't seeing any caribou towards the end of the season at base camp, and I got in with the pilot and went for a fly. I said, "We'll go see if we can find." And here, coming across that plateau, there must have been, we counted over 1,000, and they were still coming down the river, little bunches of 20 to 50, and all traveling and coming down those trails that I hadn't seen a caribou on in 4 or 5 years. But at times, there they are, right? And that's the way caribou are. They don't come down those trails every year. They might only come down them every 10 or 15 years, but that's the way they are. And you can't put them in a box and say they should be here today, because that's not the way they operate. They go where they want to go, and they don't do the same thing 2 years in a row, from what I see.
Very interesting. I'd like to get your perspective, Harold. You've seen a lot over the years. What's been your most, I guess, memorable moment on the mountain? I'd love to hear of an absolute, I don't know, a train wreck or something really interesting, some scary stories of the mountains that you could share with us, that you're willing to share with us, or some crazy stories.
Well, the craziest one, I think, was I trailed in one year with my 2 nephews when Bill was still running the area. He'd bought, I think, 3 or 4 new horses that year that hadn't run with the string at all. So they were outsiders in the string. A couple of them weren't even broke. And we headed in, and it had been raining, and it was continuing to rain. And the first day, there's not much water. But the second day, going down the Caribou Cry, it was it was bad. Almost every place we cross, we had to swim. The caribou cries usually knee deep, and it gets bigger as you go down. You ride down it for about a day and a half on our trail in. We got down to the river the first day, and the next day we started heading down the river, and there was just three of us. So I had the two boys at the back, and I was riding the lead. And these new horses were giving them some trouble. And there was a place about where we usually stopped at 1 and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a little meadow full of grass. And we got there, or I got there, and the boys weren't behind me. I hadn't seen them for a while. I figured, well, they must have had to repack a horse or whatever. Anyway, I got to this meadow and unpacked the pack horses that I had, and tied up some horses and waited and waited and waited. And it came after supper time, and the boys weren't there. And I thought, well, they're in trouble. So I put a bunch of the horses on hobbles and took a quiet old horse in case they were hurt or something, and went back. I rode one and led one, and I probably went back about 3 hours, and there they were. They had a fire going, and they'd tried to catch one of these new horses that quit the bunch and wouldn't follow because they didn't like swimming the rivers. And he went to catch one of these horses in a wheel and kicked him, and he was hurt pretty bad. So I said, do you think you can ride old Moosey, this really quiet old horse, if I get you on him? And I said, I've got horses tied up and horses on hobbles. We got to try and keep them together at least. So anyway, we did get him on the horse, and I got him some food and stuff, and we rode back and got with the others, and I switched the ones that were tied up with the ones that were on hobbles and let him graze a little more. So anyway, by the time we got back, a couple of the new horses that were there, and I think they must have been hobbled. Maybe they weren't on hobbles because they didn't know how, but I just figured they would stay there in that grassy meadow with the others. They were gone. And so I left the kids there, and they were young. My nephews were probably 17 and 18 or something like that. I said, you guys stay here and try and, rotate them so they can graze. I'll see if I can track these horses down that left. And I tracked them across the mountainside, and it's hard. It's all moss and on steep hillside. And, I must have gone 4 or 5 miles upriver looking for them, and still hadn't found them. And I thought, well, I got hungry horses, I got a hurt kid, and the horses are out of feed where we're at. I might never catch up to these horses if they kept going. I think I better go back to camp and where the boys are, and we'll move the horses down onto the gravel bars where there's something to eat and set up camp. So we did that. I got back to them. I think we spent the night there, and then the next morning we moved them down onto the bars, and the river hadn't gone down at all. It was getting worse, and where they had some feed. And we camped there for a day or two, hoping the water would go down, and it hadn't gone down. And we were out of grub. While we were waiting there, I cut some trail across the hillside so we could get downriver to the next big set of bars without having to cross. And so we got the whole bunch going down on this trail I'd cut on the side of the mountain, and got down to this set of bars where I was planning to stop and spend the night and hope the water would go down again. Well, when we got there, the horses just bailed in. There was a crossing right there where we hit the bars where they normally cross, and they just all bailed in and swam across. So we had no choice but to follow. So we swam across, and when we got down to where we usually camp at a camp we call table camp, I asked the boys, I said, do you guys want to stay here, or do you want to keep going? And they said, we're wet now, let's just keep going. So we went on downriver. We had to swim a couple more. There was one really bad crossing coming up that was just above a big log jam, and only one little trail where you could get up the mountain out of the river. And I said, we can't let them go down there. Luckily, a lady I knew that had cooked and wrangled there with Bill before I got there had told me once about trailing out. The river was that bad trailing out, and she had found a different route where you didn't have to go across that crossing. She said there's a little hanging valley, and if you can get up on the side of the mountain and get in that little hanging valley, it'll take you around above that crossing, and you don't have to cross it. So we got the horses stopped, and the boys stayed there and watched them, got a bunch of them tied up, and I went up and found this trail on this little hanging valley and cut and blazed until we got up to it, and walked it far enough that I could tell we could make it through there. So I went back down and got the boys and got the horses to follow me up there. And I thought, well, we got it made now. I had always looked at a place when we got to the next, so we left the Caribou Cry then, once we'd gone through that hanging valley, and crossed through a mountain pass called Wolf Pass. And it's probably 5 miles through there. And then you hit the Twitcha, and we have to cross the Twitcha. Well, the old horse trail had crossed the Twitcha 3 times. It would cross to the north side, then back to the south, and then back to the north, and then go up the Middleoff River towards Willowhandle Lake and Stans area. Anyway, I knew I didn't want to cross. It was a bad crossing. Even in good water, it was a bad crossing, that first one where they go down this creek and cross it by a bunch of beaver dams, and it was always a bad crossing. I said, we can't let the horses go down there. But I said, I'm sure we can go along the top of the mountain. There was a bench there, a little bit boggy, but a bench that we could ride along and avoid those 2 crossings, and then we only had to cross once. So we did that. We were planning to do that, and one of the horses had a pack turn, so we stopped. The 3 of us stopped and reset this pack. Well, the rest of them took off on the run down the trail, heading towards to the Twitcha. And I thought, oh no, they're going to go down, and we'll have horses scattered all over. So anyway, we started following them, got this horse repacked, and we got right to where I thought this is where I would turn off and go along on that bench. And those old pack horses that had been there for years and had seen that high water before, they stopped there and they were just grazing in the bush, and all the young ones were with them. And I just rode around in front of them and said, come on, boys. And they followed me. And we went across that bush, that bench, and missed that bad crossing because somebody would have died in it, I think. And same with the other one that we avoided by going in that up through that little hanging valley. Anyway, the crossing there I thought wouldn't be bad because it's usually knee deep. It's a big, wide riffle on the Twitcha. And we got about a third of the way across, and we were swimming, and it was swift, and horses were getting washed downstream. But it's all nice bars there. So everybody eventually got across and up on the bank. It was a little bit of a struggle for some of them, but all the horses made it across, and we made it across. We had to unpack and repack our pack horses. The panners were right full of water because the water go right over top of their boxes, and we got them all repacked, and then headed up the Middleoff, and I think we got to Mountain Lake that night. It was, I don't know, it must have been 1 or something in the morning to Stan's camp at Willowhandle Lake, and we spent the night there, and I gave him a day's rest, and then we just had to get across the mountain, and we were at Gana, so yeah, we gave him a day off, and then we trailed from there and got to Palmer Lake. It took us what usually takes 5 days to trail in. I think we were 9, and it was the ugliest trail in my years there, so it wasn't fun. Anyway, after the first sheep hunt, I got done a little bit early, and we were wondering what had happened to these 2 horses, and I was hoping I'd hear from Stan or somebody that they'd come out and showed up out on the Canal, but nobody had seen them. Anyway, one of the guys who had helped put in the hydro system or the power system in 97 had been there just to do some service on the power line. And when our pilot flew him out to 222, I said, you watch along the Caribou Cry for those horses. And anyway, he came back later that day and he said, I saw your horses, Harold. They're up in a high little hanging valley up on the side of the mountain halfway up the Caribou Cry. And I thought, well, if I'd have followed them a few more miles, I would have had them because I'd been pretty close to there. Anyway, I thought, now how am I ever going to get down there to get them? Anyway, later that day, the chopper lands in camp, and it's a chopper pilot from Norman Wells that I knew, and he said, I said, where are you going? And he said, I got to go to 222. And I said, I need a ride. Do you mind dropping me off on the Caribou Cry? And he said, nope. So I grabbed my saddle and a sleeping bag and a little bit of grub and a wee little bag with a few oats in it and threw it in the chopper. And he says, where are you going? I said, I got some horses down there. I got to go bring it. He said, okay. And so anyway, it was 2 of these new horses that weren't even broke. So he flew me down there and he landed in this little it's a little willowy, grassy, beautiful grass, tall grass up on like it is sometimes right up above tree line. And he landed there and he says, "You want me to stay and make sure you can catch them?" And I says, "No." I said, "I'll catch them." I said, "I got some oats, and the one's a real sucker for oats." So I said, they're not going to let me catch them when you're making all this noise. So he left. And anyway, I went and caught these two horses and got one of them eating oats and got a halter on him. And then the other one I pretty much had. And so I decided, well, which one am I going to try and ride? So I threw my saddle on one and tied him to the other one and led him down off the mountain. And yeah, took me. They did not want to go. They did not want to get their feet wet, let alone swim. And it was quite a struggle. But I didn't give up. And the worst was the first river crossing. If I could keep the water shallow enough that it didn't hit their belly, they would go. And as soon as it hit their belly, they'd balk and wouldn't go. And I'm not kidding. I was riding this bay horse, leading a big Belgian blue roan, and we were in the middle of the river for about 3 or 4 hours, and they refused to go. And I wasn't going to let them go back. I was going across one way or the other, and it was just barely up on their belly. It wasn't deep, and it wasn't too swift. But they would go around in circles, and I'd try and get them to go. But I'm trying to lead one and make this colt that wasn't even broke go. And it was finally after, it was probably 4 hours in the middle of that ice cold water. He decided he was going to walk across. He was getting cold enough. And when he walked across, the one I was leading balked, and I didn't want to stop him. So I let him go across and got him up on the bank, the one I was riding. And I just tied him up and took my pants off and walked out and got the other one and led him across because I wasn't going back in there. But after that, because I didn't give up, after that, they would cross the crossings as long as they didn't have to swim. And it took me 3 days or something to get them back to camp. But I eventually got there. So it was quite an adventure.
Wow, that's incredible. Wow, that's a story for sure. Wow, that's awesome. So, Harold, the one thing I want to touch on before we wrap up here, and I really appreciate all your time today. I know you're a busy guy, especially with spring here now and everything. But one thing I wanted to talk about was you've obviously donated a sheep hunt to the Society for 2026. And so our dates on that hunt are, I think it's August 17th to the 26th. And I want you, if you could just touch a little bit on what that experience is going to look like for the winner of that Doll Sheep raffle. So what's their experience going to look like? Talk about the whole process, what's going to be involved, and how that all works.
Yeah, so it's a backpack hunt. So, you'll arrive in camp on the 16th from Norman Wells, and hopefully the weather's good and everything, but go through your gear with your guide and all that stuff. We'll have done a little bit of pre-scouting and know where there's some ramps where nobody's been before, or maybe in an area where one of the guides had a big one get away or something. We'll have a kind of a plan where to put you. It's a beautiful time of year. Towards the middle end of August, the leaves will start turning during this hunt, and usually by the end of the hunt, the caribou will start to rub their velvet. So it's early fall in the territories. And the weather can vary a lot, but usually it's pretty mild still. We'll fly you out most of the time on the backpack hunts. The Cubs land you on a gravel bar on a river, and you'll do maybe a 5 or 6 hour hike to get up in the Alpine, where you'll set up a little camp and start hunting from there and move on. Once in a while, they go from one strip to another, but most of the areas we hunt, you hike in, set up a little camp hunt, and then once you get around, pack back out to your pickup point. Some of the areas you might hunt caribou right there, but a lot of times once people get around, they come into base camp and regroup, and we can put them out somewhere where we're seeing lots of caribou. And quite often there are a lot of caribou coming through base camp, and you can hunt caribou for base camp if that's an option on the hunt as well.
That's awesome. So obviously somebody's got to have a certain level of fitness to do this. You don't want to show up thinking that they're going to be sitting on a horseback and not doing any work whatsoever. They're going to have to put some effort into it.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we can tailor hunts. This one's getting on. That's our 4th hunt of the year. So a lot of the areas will have been hunted already. We try to put guys in fresh areas that haven't been hunted before. The areas are big enough that we can usually do that. We do have some areas that are a little simpler, a little easier than others. So if we get guys that don't look like they can, do that physical hunt, we put them somewhere where it's usually a little easier. Some guys want the biggest physical challenge they can get. So it all depends who's the lucky winner in the raffle.
Yeah, that's awesome. And success rates, average age of rams you guys are taking, what sort of numbers are we looking at like that, Harold?
Historically, the last 2 years, the guys that were able to hunt, we were 100%. Some years we might be at, a 90% success rate, but that's sort of as poor as it ever gets in the Mackenzies. Age average, we've averaged 10 to 10 and a half years old, average age on our rams for forever, basically. I don't think I've ever had an age average where we were under 10 in the years that I've run the area. And average size is usually 37, with some of those rams being broomed rams. So 37 inches is sort of our average. There's always some 40s, and, you wish everybody could shoot a big one, but that's not the way hunting works. There's averages, right? And big ones and little ones. So, but we take, some years we take quite a few broomed rams, and some years not so many. But yeah, it's, you should have a great hunt.
Awesome. And so somebody that comes in, harvests their ram, what else can they expect to do? What kind of stuff do they have to kill the time if they happen to tag out early?
Yeah, if they get a ram, there's good fishing in the lake at Palmer at base camp. It's not big fish, but fun fishing and good to eat. And hunt for caribou. You can also Wolverine. It's unless you've got gut pile or something, but I encourage everybody just to carry a tag in case they see one, because there's something that, for the price of a tag, you don't want to say you can't harvest one if you get the opportunity, right? And with Wolverine especially, it always seems like it's a guy who doesn't have a tag that sees one. Comes walking right by him.
Yeah, awesome. And so if somebody's interested, obviously they grab a Wolverine or a wolf tag. Are there any trophy fees or any extra fees on that? And then what's it cost to do a caribou if somebody wants to do that?
Yeah, the caribou this year, harvest fee on caribou this year is $12,000 if they are successful in shooting one. Their government harvest fee, the government calls it a harvest fee now. I think it's $450 or something for a sheep or a caribou, and I think it's $200 and some for a wolf or a Wolverine. Actually, wolf is free. There's no harvest fees and no license fees on wolves. They're encouraging people to shoot some of the wolves to hopefully keep the caribou population strong.
Awesome. Well, it just sounds like an amazing hunt, and my only regret is I'm not allowed to put in for these raffles because, man, I'd love to come up there and hunt with you, especially in your kind of your last year at the helm there, Harold. It'd sure be an honor to be up there with you guys, and amazing what you guys have done and what you've done, Harold, for obviously the Northwest Territories, for obviously the tourism side of it, for the hunting community, for Gana River, and for our broader conservation community. So just can't thank you enough. I guess before we wrap up, is there anything else that we need to hit on or anything we missed that we didn't chat on today? I know we had a sort of roving topic list, but anything else we missed there?
No, I think that's really good, Kyle. I want to congratulate you. I see you're the new CEO for Wild Sheep National right now, serving as interim president of the board. So congratulations on that, and thank you for your service and all that you do for Wild Sheep Society and for the national level as well. Pleasure, Harold. Thank you so much, and yeah, it's an honor to serve such a great group of people, and just when we have membership like you, Harold, and so many others that are so passionate, do so much for the resource. It's pretty inspiring. It feels pretty good to get up every day and sort of help do the little part to support everybody else, because it's such a great community that we have. So appreciate you, and hopefully we can do this again. I'd love to do it one-on-one. I'd love to sit down with you and see you face-to-face, but it's always, like I said, in Calgary, in Red Deer, I didn't even see you. I was actually embarrassed that I didn't even get to chat with you. Yeah, it's a big crowd. It's hard to talk to everybody in the room that you know, right? And yeah, I've been around long enough. I know too many people, so it's impossible for me to talk to all of them. Seems like. Yeah. Yeah, well said. Well, thank you again so much, Harold. We appreciate you and appreciate everything you do. Thanks again. All right. Thanks for having me on, Kyle.